So to start off, I want to introduce our panelists, and I'll give them an opportunity to have them introduce themselves as well and talk a little bit about their mathematical journey. So starting off, we have Dr. Kalina Mincheva, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Mathematics at Tulane. We have Dr. Swati Patel, who is a postdoctoral researcher in the Department of Statistics at the University of Warwick. We have Dr. Vanessa Rivera Quiñones, who is a freelance data science instructor and consultant. And we have Dr. Sindhu Unnithan, who is a professor and department head at Xavier University in Louisiana. So if you want to, somebody want to volunteer to go first, or I can choose someone.
I can go.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Swati Patel. I'm a postdoc here at University of Warwick, which is in the United Kingdom right now. And I guess I should talk about my career path. Is that what you were asking? Okay. Yeah. So I'm currently a postdoc, and I think I took somewhat like a roundabout way of getting into mathematics. So when I was an undergrad, I didn't know at all like what I wanted to study. I mean, I switched majors or thought about a lot of different majors, including like law and social policy education. And eventually I started doing research in biology. So I really liked organisms. So I started biology. And then the more that I was like doing this research in biology, it just became really apparent to me that modeling was such a useful skill to have to be able to do research in biology. And so that's what led me into math. So I didn't start math until two years after I actually graduated from my undergraduate degree. And then I started graduate school in biology. So I was in a PhD program for biology. And then I transferred to go into math because I decided that that's what I wanted to do. And that's what really excited me at that point. I realized it later. So that's it.
Okay, I'll go next. Okay. I'm Sindhu Unnithan. I'm at Xavier. I've been here for 32 years. Before you all are born sometimes. I teach some of my students, and I've taught their kids. And I said I need to get out before I teach their grandkids. Okay. So I've been here and in India. So I grew up in India. I did my undergraduate studies in India and my master's too. And back in India, by the time you're 18, I think you have to make up your mind. You have to decide your profession because everybody's studying. It's not easy to go change. Okay, that's one wonderful thing I notice about the US. You can always change. You can study whenever you want. Okay, so that's very difficult. By the time you're 18, you have to have a profession. Like you go into medical school, engineering school, bank official, board exams. So I wanted to go into teaching. So I finished my undergraduate degree and I went straight to master's. I did my master's in India too. And before I didn't want to go into PhD. I wanted to teach. So I had to do my MPhil. There's something called MPhil for your PhD. I finished that. And while I was doing my MPhil, my professor, he knew one of the professors basically at Tulane, Dr. Pierre Grillet. He was in semi-group theory. And that was my field, but I didn't want to come then. You know, that was in the late 70s. I didn't want to come here as a student. So then, in the end, I came here as a housewife, and my husband was working here, and Tulane was the only school that I could go to because that's the only graduate school. And back then, you could take your GRE only twice a year in April and November. It's all the whole day you have to take it. So I came in December and my husband said, don't waste, let's go there, go take classes in the spring. So I came to Tulane, walked up and Dr. Witter, I think he's still there. He walked with me to the Kendall room for the registration paper. I hadn't taken the GRE, I hadn't taken the TOEFL, but he walked with me and he said, okay, take one, because I liked algebra. I took 712, the algebra 3. I don't know if that's the number now. And Dr. Downs, he's no longer there. He passed away like a few years back. So I took that. I got a good grade in that. So I was given assistantship for the coming years. But then I had a baby and all that. I took off for 2 years. So there was a lot of things that happened after I came here, but I made it. Okay. So because I think that's a good part. If you're being a student on your own, that's nice. Okay. When you have like family, when you start, then it's not easy. So that's the good advice that I would give everybody. Finish off your studies as much as you can before you venture on to something else. Okay. I think that's and I'm always thankful to Dr. Veda. Okay, so when I say that, okay.
I'll go next. Then I think it lines up nicely. So I'm gonna share some slides, mostly because I'm very visual and I tend to be very distracted as well. So hopefully this helps me keep on point. Okay. Awesome. So this is from the directory. So I have many interests and a very non-linear path to most things I do. So I try to always put all the info out there in case it resonates with someone in the audience. They can reach out to me anytime. But my career has been always kind of tied to math. I like math in high school. I competed in math competitions. I just found it really powerful that you could always arrive at the same at a very concrete answer. So I started a bachelor's in pure math. I also minor in finance back in Puerto Rico, where I'm originally from. After that bachelor's, I actually wanted to go into math finance, but I had done work in biostatistics, in number theory as an undergrad. So as you can see, even as an undergrad, I had many diverging interests. So once I went to Illinois for my master's in applied math and eventually my PhD, I started working in a project in actuarial sciences and decided that, this is not for me. I didn't like it at all. So thankfully, I had a mentor during my first year of grad school, and she did math biology. And I just loved working with her so much that I decided, hey, sort of like Swati mentioned, I love math modeling. I mean, it can be anything, but my advisor did math biology applied to Daphnia epidemics. And I was like, okay, I'll go for this. So I ended up finishing my training as a math biologist back in 2019. But after that, I wanted to highlight this part because after graduating with a PhD, I didn't go into any specific type of job. Usually you go into a postdoc or you enter a tenure track or you go into straight into industry. But I spent most of 2019 thinking about what I wanted to do that felt very purposeful and tied to my values. So I'm gonna switch a bit to talk about that because I think it's very important to my story. And I think this is something that not everybody goes through. And at any stage in your career where you're shifting, you graduate, you're switching a job, you get a postdoc, this is the question that always comes to mind. It's like, what should I do in my life? And that question has had many different answers and comes with a lot of extra questions to help me figure it out. But sort of how Pamela mentioned in her talk, like I've been trying really hard to find a career that aligns with my values. So I have this ABC cube, I call it, of values. And I've been trying to find a career for me that captures most of them or try to capture most of them. So that has looked like very different. So in that year of professional drift, I was a substitute teacher. I was also a high school teacher, and decided that it wasn't something I actually enjoyed, even though I thought I would. And then eventually I started teaching data science, and now I'm a consultant at Equilo, which is an app that creates a dashboard of countries that is meant to help countries understand gender parity or inequity in across the globe. So I feel like after drifting, I've landed in a space where I have sort of freedom to choose what projects I'm in or involved in. And career-wise, that looks like freelance data consultant and instructor. But math-wise, that looks like being involved with lab-disms, Math Swagger that Dr. Pamela Harris mentioned. I also am involved in the AMA and the AMS. And I'm sort of slowly but surely building also my math family, because even though now I'm in industry, I say quote unquote because I feel very much still connected to sort of the more traditional math community. I've been able to work on so many projects with people that really care about each other and about making math a better place. So right now I'm in the space of, trying to grow as a data scientist and data science consultant, but also trying to grow with my math family. So I'll leave it at that for now, but that's sort of the summary.
This is amazing. So tough act to follow. Okay, so my name is Kalina Mincheva. I come from a country called Bulgaria. It is a small country in Southeast Europe, bordering Greece. I did my initial education there. I did go to a liberal arts college as an undergraduate, but it was still in my country. It's called the American University in Bulgaria. So I did, in a sense, get liberal arts education, even though I was there, and I was a computer science major. And I had decided to be a computer science major, and I was for the first 2 years of my education. And then I took a class which was marketed as math for computer scientists. So when I took that, this turned out to be algebraic geometry in disguise. And it was amazing. It was interesting. I had decided I don't want to do math after taking 3 calculus classes. This was not what I really found interesting, but I took this class and I found it's amazing. And I declared a math major in the beginning of my junior year. So I graduated, decided to do more math. I decided to do this amazing thing called algebraic geometry. I went to a master's degree because in Europe, that's sort of the path. You go to master's, then a PhD. I went and took a class. It was in Hungary with all the other graduate students there. The class was called algebraic geometry. I was very confident that I'm going to do great. Of course, we covered everything I knew in the first class. And it was a really hard and tough experience, and in a sense, soul crushing. But then I decided that this is amazing, and I continued trying to learn this amazing subject. Went to the US, got a PhD, got a postdoc, was lucky enough to get a postdoc, and then get a tenure track position, which brought me here. I still don't really do something that most people think it's algebraic geometry. I do tropical geometry, which is one way to get close to algebraic geometry. But yeah, this is quickly my path to here.
Thank you all for your answers. So the next question we have is, what advice would you give yourself many years ago?
Maybe I'll start.
Okay,
I feel like many years ago, it's like I feel like I give myself back advice all the time. At every step, I'm like, oh, I have advice for my past self. But I think for me, when I started my math journey, I was very, very hyper focused on sort of the traditional career path, right? Like, I went from undergrad, people told me the next step is a PhD. So I went to the PhD. And while I was really reflective of the type of math I wanted to do, I never really looked at anything outside of math. I had been involved in many leadership roles throughout both undergrad and grad school, and it never occurred to me that that's an important part of my identity and something I really enjoy. Because even though I always do math, I always do math plus all this other stuff. And I think if I had been more conscious of that during my studies, I maybe would have looked for different opportunities or different experiences to really explore that before, right, graduating, or really trying to figure what was my passion with math, outside of math. Um, yes, that's one part of it. And the second biggest thing is just finding people you enjoy doing your work with. Could be general, but specifically math. I think I didn't learn until, right, I participated in my swagger with Pamela that she mentioned, right, that she looks for collaborators that, right, that really, you know, she can really work with, that are her friends that you can do also math with. And I never really thought of prioritizing that when I did research math. So now I'm going back and rediscovering my love for research, because during my PhD, I didn't have many people to work with. So I'm trying to then also build that part of collaboration within math, so I can have more fun than I did when I did it by myself. So I think those are my two main advice for my past.
I think it's nice to be really prepared for all the classes. Like I said, I finished my master's in India, but I had no connection with computers. This is in the late 70s, okay? So I didn't have any programming languages, nothing. I didn't even know how to type, even everything was so bad. So when I came here at Tulane from 84, I took 2 undergraduate classes at Loyola. Uh, I paid my own. I went. It was Fortran. I think that was the language. I loved Fortran. That was a really nice language. Fortran and Pascal, I think. And that's the only. That was my handicap actually with computers. And while I was at Tulane, I don't know if Lisa Fauci and Victor Moll are here too. I saw them earlier too. So they joined Tulane at 80 in the year 86. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. So I was there from 84 to 89, and they were there. And I took a class with Lisa Fauci, and I don't think she remembers it now. I didn't do good in that class. I barely, because that is a handicap. So it's nice if you, and then I cut it off. That's it. And still, I think I like that. I'm not very computer efficiency. That is a little problem. But I think it's nice if you can be an all-around person. Even, and I didn't take any other classes at Tulane also with computing. I was pure algebra, abstract algebra. So that was okay.
If I can add to that, I do also, I do want to echo what Vanessa said. It is absolutely vital to have a network and a support group in mathematics, not even just for working and doing research, but just like taking classes and knowing to go to your friends who also take the same classes and say, hey, this was hard. Was this hard for you too? Or also mentors. This was something that it did not occur to me, but I have been pushed through this path by people at every stage. There was someone who said, hey, go do a PhD in math. There was always someone saying, hey, well, you didn't get into MIT or whatever, but you can still go to a good school and get good at mathematics education. You should still do this. And there's value in this. And it doesn't have to be a senior faculty at your school, because those probably walked this path 30 years ago. Find your TA, find your friends, have people to support you and say, hey, you had a bad day. You can do this. You're a good, you're thinking right, you're putting the effort. And it's so much, if you feel isolated, you've lost a game. It's not worth, this is not worth the effort trying to go through this alone. Having a support group and mentors is, I think, one of the biggest things you can do for yourself.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that too, I also had the advice to find people to talk to, but not just about mathematics, but also about like all of the other challenges that go along with it, like growing professionally, or sorry, personally as well, like being able to deal with stress or anxiety about it. I would say don't be afraid to talk to people about everything else too, in addition to math, because it helps so much to have connections with people going through things as well. Yeah, that's my one advice. And then to myself from many years ago, my other piece of advice to myself from many years ago is to not take everything so seriously, to just like relax a little more. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add one more advice because Sindhu reminded me of it. In undergrad, I took C++, and it was such a challenging class for me, and I hated it. I was like, I will never be a programmer. Nope, not interested. My professor was like, no, take the second part. And I'm like, no, I'm good if I don't. And it turned out, right, that, you know, my PhD is in applied math biology, and I ended up learning to program MATLAB. In data science, now I learn another languages. I use Python, I use R, I use any language that gets the job done. So, you know, sometimes we're really harsh on ourselves, right, when we're trying to learn these skills, and it's worth, you know, thinking about, is this skill useful enough for what I want to do, that is worth, you know, kind of pushing through and getting it, but also be kind to yourself, right? Like you can pick up skills as you go. And as for some learners, you know, it's always gonna be hard at the start, but like if you really want to do it and it's something you're passionate about, it's worth, you know, sticking to it, but not by yourself, like Kalina said. I think it helps if you know, you struggle with some class, you know, go get help from the TAs, your peers, and build that community to inspire you.
And on that note, because it was in the late 70s, early 80s, we didn't have laptops, computers. We had to go to school. If we had to do some programming, you have to do it after school or weekends. And when you go to on weekends, they're not fully staffed sometimes at Loyola. They are like student workers, and they couldn't help us. So sometimes I thought it was a waste of time. You know, I'm a housewife, I'm almost a mom, I don't know what. I had so many other things. So weekends are gone. So I got a little upset with that way also. I thought I was wasting a lot of time.
Thank you. That was all really great advice. So our next question is, do you remember a specific experience of where you wished you had done something differently? And if you were to do it over, what would you change?
Yeah, I didn't have any like specific instance when I thought about this question, but lots of like little instances. And I think the big thing for me is that I would not be so afraid of taking risks or so afraid of failure, because I feel like that fear has caused me to not pursue things sometimes along my career path so far. And then I look back at those times and I'm like, why didn't I just go for it? It doesn't really make any sense in hindsight not to. And so I think I would figure out ways of practicing getting beyond that fear and just going for it and doing it.
I think one thing would be like to be more open-minded. I was one of those kids who was like, oh, I like algebra. I don't like analysis. I don't care about analysis. I'm only going to learn it. Boy, was I wrong. And mathematics is all interconnected. For some reason, I didn't see it. It took me many years to do so. Now I'm proving things about continuous functions, some math karma. But yeah, so be open-minded, learn things. Everything is interesting. Don't decide that you know what you want.
Yeah, try to be flexible, and it's okay to change. And I think in the United States, you have so many opportunities for that. I wish I was an undergraduate here sometimes. I think maybe I would have been different. it's easy to be a student here if you study and if you focus. Be focused, and I think it's easier. Because back in India, it's one track. If you went into that field, then there's no change. Maybe it's changed now, but like 30, 40 years back, it was different. You make up your mind, you decide, then it's no going back. You couldn't change. So then I didn't miss anything. So I was in that track. That's it. It's nice here.
Yeah, I think I'll echo the math karma. I think, right, it happened to me with programming mostly. Like I programmed so much, and I used to be like, no, programming. I like pure things. I don't need computers. Like that's not necessary. But I guess for me also, it feels like there were big moments and little moments, but I relate a lot to what Swati mentioned about failure. I learned this acronym FAIL, like first attempt in learning. And I'm trying to really embrace that, because a lot of my experience in grad school, I do not think it needed to be that isolating or that challenging, if I had a different perspective about it. And I'll say, right, like, you're taking all these hard classes, you're juggling a lot of things, and I forgot the math was supposed to be fun for me. that this was something I enjoyed doing and that I liked thinking about. And I think mostly it was because I added all that pressure of not failing, or things needed to look a particular way, instead of saying, well, this is how this looks like for me and what works for me. And it's been a process to rediscover that now. But yeah, I wish like there's many incidents with that idea of this needs to look this way stop me from doing something that I thought was important, or it would be healthy for me, or I would enjoy. That I think if I could change that, those instances, I would maybe be somewhere else, right? You never know. It's a hard thing to predict, but failure is, or fear of failure is really something that can limit what you want to do, and I would try to work on that a little bit more.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to the next question? So the next question is, sometimes academia conflicts with life outside of math. Do you have any advice with regards to frequent moving, starting a family, the two-body problem, etc.?
Yeah, I'm not sure. This isn't advice, but I feel like I'm in the middle of this right now because I have been moving a lot in the last 5 years from postdocs, and I was long distance from my partner, and we're moving again in a year, and it's challenging. So it's not advice, but more just basic acknowledgement that it's challenging to balance or to figure out the right moves. And I guess what happens is that you just end up taking it one day or a month or a year at a time. And it's, yeah, that you kind of make decisions at every step along the way that seem best for you at that moment. And somehow that's how you end up somewhere. Maybe not super helpful.
No, I appreciate you saying that, because it is a very challenging problem. And I think I try to think about it in the modeling perspective, because that's how my brain is wired now. And it's too complex, right? Like it is too complex. You cannot model all the parameters needed. You can't predict that far in the future either. Circumstances change all the time. So it resonates that, right? Like you kind of have to take it a step at a time and sort of keep track of some big goals, right? So to give you some direction, but it's really challenging because not everything depends on you, right? Like I'm also in a long distance relationship with my partner all through grad school, and I'm still in the process of trying to make sure that, you know, I still pursue the career that I want, and I'm able to be in the same place as my partner. So it is challenging because also it was very personal. I think a lot of times when we think about the two body problem or any sort of life decision, it's just, it depends on, right, the relationship you're trying to build with, relationship to whom, what are your joint goals, what is available at the time. So I think it's really hard to give advice. But for me, I think the advice is very broad, right? Take it kind of a step at a time, right? But also be kind to yourself in this process. I think a lot of people add a lot of pressure to make sure that the decision is optimal. And in my experience, there's no optimal solution most of the time. So take that into account, that you are doing the best you can. And as long as you know, keep trying, if it's important to you, it, you know, like you'll find a way, but it'll likely look not similar to any other way. So I don't know if that's discouraging or it gives you hope, but it's sort of what my thoughts.
Yeah. Try to be organized. Don't procrastinate. I am a procrastinator. I try not to, but if you make time for yourself and all your studies, everything, if you do things promptly, it's much better. But I don't think it's easy all the time. And stay focused. And your studies are important. So when you're a student, be a student first. It's not easy, and finish it up. Okay, and like you said, be friends, talk with each other. That's really important, talking with each other. I couldn't do that much because I was mostly a mother, housewife. But while I was on campus at Gibson Hall, I knew all the people, that place. I loved Tulane. Okay, I had a good experience at Tulane. So it's like,
Yeah, I think, oh, go ahead. No,
sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say, so I think the question has two parts. One of it is sort of more local and the other more global. For the more local math-life balance, try to learn to say no. I'm very guilty of not being able to do that. To find time for yourself, to rest. One of my colleagues used to say you can do more work in 6 days than in 7. You have to be kind to yourself and find time for yourself. If you're constantly tired, that's not going to work. So that's one. And the other thing about the more global thing and the two-body problem, I'm very guilty of not being able to solve this. I had a very long relationship during grad school for 10 years. We couldn't solve the problem. Academia is sometimes the relationship with academia could be very abusive. And I think one thing that I did for myself before applying for tenure track positions was saying there are more important things to me in my life. For example, I want to have a family. And if I don't get a tenure track position and I have to move for another postdoc, I'm just going to walk away. And this is it for me. And there'll be other ways for me to do math, but there's only so much I'm willing to sacrifice from the other areas of math that are my life that are important to me. So this is something, a conversation everyone needs to have with themselves and decide what's really important for them.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Something that I wanted to add is not advice, but I think what we need is more policies and institutional practices that support careers of families that are more supportive to families. And I think, then we won't have to be in this position where we feel like we have to make a choice between developing our career or pursuing family opportunities, or developing a family. And I'd like, I don't know, it's always on my mind to, as I move along in my career, to keep that in mind as something that I want to push for as I become more established. for me, specifically what helped solve my two-body problem was that I went to an institution that had a policy where if one of us was offered a position, they would look into hiring the partner. And so it worked out from my particular situation, but we're extremely lucky. And I think institutions should think about developing these kinds of practices.
And thank you all for sharing. Those are some really interesting perspectives, but really good. So the next question that we have is something, and a couple of you have already talked a little bit about this, but maybe expand more. What drove you to math?
I'll maybe start. Yes, I think I thought, given this question a lot of thought, I think is a mix of very good early experiences and being told that I was good at math. But also there was something very soothing about math for me. I think I'm slowly discovering what that is. I'm a very distracted person. I have trouble focusing a lot. I'm trying to develop ways to navigate that now. But math was a space that didn't have that. When I worked on a math problem, I felt like I could always see the next step. Like that didn't really come that easily in other parts of my, studies or my life. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the sort of like knowing that you go through this process and you find an answer. Maybe you go back, right? Maybe that answer is wrong, but I really enjoyed that part of discovering. So when I was in high school, my goal was like, oh wow, I love math. I'm gonna go to the library and gonna study so hard that I can open any book and understand it, right? I didn't know the depths of math at that point, right? I know that that's a bit unrealistic right now. But that sort of drove me. I was just like this. I thought it was fascinating that you could, this subject that I thought I was pretty much already a closed chapter, had so many layers to it. And I loved it. And then once I started doing more applied math, I could see, wow, I can use these math skills to say something that would potentially affect people's lives. So I did an REU that was studying glaucoma and how we can detect it efficiently. And I was just like, wow, I was sort of amazed. So I think that alongside having people who sort of told me you could do it, or these are things you could do, really motivated me to keep on doing math.
Yeah, along the same, maybe similar perspective, I think what drove me to math, and I mentioned this a little earlier, is the ability. So I was in biology doing research, and it's just so complex. And I was like, this is so complicated. And I liked how modeling and math could take this very complex system, and we can model it and try to simplify it so that we can make sense of it. And I just liked that it was helping me make sense of this very crazy world that we live in.
And as for me, it's like I liked math in school, and then by 15, 16, it's like math. My aunt, my sister was in math major. My aunt was a math major, so math was running in the family. So, and then and then you have to make up your decision by the time you're 15 or 16. So it just went there. But I wanted pure math. I wanted to teach, I liked teaching. Maybe that's it. So I didn't have a change of any career or anything. I liked my math, and that's how, for me, it's not.
For me, I know I said that like really what the pivoting moment was. But I think that like what drove me to math was my mom. She had all these like communist books of math problems. She's like, okay, sit here and solve these. And then I'll cry and I wouldn't be able to solve them. But at some point, you find that after the struggle, that there's this beautiful solution and there's something you understood that you didn't before. And now you see the world more fully. And even though my decision to do math was extremely personal and very selfish, I at this point didn't care about any other helping the humanity, just do my own math. There was a lot of beauty in it that I couldn't at that point pinpoint because I was little, but like polynomials and integers gave me warm fuzzy feeling, and I think that this was something that stuck with me, and I lost it during high school and taking calculus. I'm really sorry, but up until taking abstract algebra and algebraic geometry, I couldn't find it back. This love for math. So this was, this was my take on it.
Great. So the next question we have is, what would be one thing you would change in the way that you do math now? And this is asked by Selby.
I will say, like, the way I do math now is very different, right? Like I work as a data consultant, and what that means is that, right, like I get tasks, projects, and it kind of depends on the person who gave me the project, how I do it, right? But I've been slowly getting back to research. I'm working on some projects with Candice Price. And I've been thinking a lot about what I want the process to look like. And I know for a fact that I don't want it to look isolated. I need to be able to talk with people about my math. Hopefully the people I talk to about my math is people that share my values, or they're closely enough aligned that I feel like I can also share other parts of myself. For me, thinking about questions that tie to other areas, I think this is something you can do more with applied math. I don't know how you would do it with very theoretical math, but something that I've always been interested in and kind of is involved in my thesis, but not really, is like, how does cooperation evolve? This is like my life question. And I don't understand it, and I want to understand it. So right now I'm trying to figure out ways I can tie my math to other questions I have around me. And I have the flexibility to do that. And I know that's not always possible. So for me, like, math now looks like making sure I have, people I can work with, interesting questions that align to a bigger picture than just math. And that I feel like I'm using both my skills, my math skills, but maybe other skills I have, right? Like maybe how I connect with people, maybe interest in other areas of science or social science, and sort of trying to find the intersection of those. But it can be challenging.
I think one thing that changed for me as I was growing up and perhaps like talking to other people about math was actually sitting down and checking my own math instead of like writing an email full of garbage and sending it to my collaborators. And they were like, what is this? Like, I solved the problem. Oh, yeah, you didn't. So sort of taking responsibility of, especially in a collaborative project, taking responsibility of what you're doing. And this is should be common sense, but yeah, no one's responsible for checking my math, anybody's math. Even if they're refereeing your paper, you should do the work. And for some reason, this took me a while to learn.
Yeah, for me lately, I've been really feeling that feeling the need to focus myself more. And I think in the last like year since my PhD, I've moved around a lot in various topics, and that can be very disconcerting. And now I'm just like, this is too big. Like there's too much going on here, and I'm feeling the need to narrow myself a little bit, just so I can really dive into it and have the time to work on something deeper but less.
And for me, it's like to work with the faculty members here. I'm changing more into number theory, not that abstract algebra that I was really focused on earlier. So according to the expertise of my colleagues here, it's much easier to work with faculty here. So that way I have changed. I'm ready to adapt to the needs, or that will help me progress.
Okay, our next question is, what do you do when you're stuck?
Great question. Yeah, like I will say that I guess I have a very low threshold for being frustrated sometimes. And when programming, like sometimes that can be that can happen a lot. And I've discovered that when I'm stuck, what works best is to actually, go somewhere else. Go for a walk, do a Zumba class, do yoga, disconnect from the problem for a bit, because I tend to be like, no, I want to get this. And then I, tense my whole body, become very stressed, and spend like, I don't know, a lot of more time that is not really going towards solving what I'm stuck in. So I found that it's very much necessary for me to disconnect and do something physical. It could be like a walk or yoga or stuff like that, to be able to think more clearly about the problem that I'm stuck in.
Yeah, I'd echo that, to give yourself space. Sometimes it can be very hard because you want to just like keep working on it until you figure it out, and like forcing yourself to do that. And it's hard to like move away from it at the moment, but it really does help in the long run, because giving yourself time to just like process it, your mind will like subconsciously process things even when you're not actively thinking on it. And so it's good to do that. And then I would add that I think another thing that can help is to read. So and you can either read like other math papers or science papers, and they might kind of inspire something. This is after you've given yourself some space already, or just reading like something else that you enjoy reading about can also just inspire, or doing something creative can inspire like new thoughts and ideas.
Like do something different every day, every night before I go to sleep. I try to do at least one Sudoku puzzle. So just to I feel happy, just something different, because right now I'm the head of the department also. So there are other things, administrative emails going on. So there's a lot of different things. So just like even if it's at 12:30, sometimes it's yesterday it was almost 12:30. But then I started doing at least one of them. The 1 and 2 puzzles are easy. You get in the newspapers, 3, 4, when you have 3, 4 stars, they're really challenging, but maybe that's good for your mental health also. So I try to do something. So keep space for yourself, do something else beyond the math all the time.
Yeah, it also helps to just do some other project. If you really need to be working and the guilt is really so strong, just keep 2 projects at the same time, go work on something else. This will help, perhaps. I mean, for me, it does.
Yeah, I'm in the book club of the university. So we have to read a book, different book. So every month we have to meet for that Zoom meeting now. So I'm in that, I have to read. It's coming up 2 weeks. So I finished 3 chapters. So that's nice, something different from me. So do something different from that.
Yeah, and I'll say also that, talking to other people sometimes help. I mean, my partner is not necessarily in math, but then I try to explain what I'm stuck in. And just the process of talking it and saying out loud, sometimes like, oh, actually, never mind. Like, this makes sense. Never mind. But, it's not always easy to find, someone that can listen or because you don't always have they don't have to understand exactly what the problem is, but just the process of explaining it often also helps me get unstuck. um,
Okay, so our next question is from Ankur, and he asks, how do you see math as playing a role for bettering the society and the world?
If you don't mind, I want to start. I just listened to another talk of Dr. Francis Su from Harvey Mudd. He has a wonderful book, Mathematics for Human Flourishing. And I think many of the answers are there. We can change math. We can change the world by applying math methods. That's very true. And I'm not the person to speak about this, but we can also just do it to be better human beings.
I second. I'm just listening to the audiobook right now, so I'm just halfway through. But I had seen Francis's talk, and it resonated with me a lot. When I started thinking about doing math, that was my goal. Like, I was like, I want to learn math, and I'm gonna change the world. Very high, high expectations. And I think during my career, I felt that go away, mostly because I couldn't see it. I felt like math was trapped in this box of expectations, of looking a certain way or doing it a certain way, that I couldn't see how it was helping the world make a better place. So this is a question I ask myself a lot now, and I'm trying to really think about what that means for the type of math I do or how I do math. I think, there is great potential. I don't think we do the best job using math to help the world. I think we get too stuck on what we know math to be like, how we teach it, right? How we prioritize it, how we evaluate it. And in my experience, I wish we would spend more time thinking about, yeah, what would that look like? Like, what does that look like when we publish a paper? What does that look like in the type of math classes we teach? Does that look like when we hold a conference, right? Or what should be the topics that are in the forefront or of our math community? Should it be, right? Should we be talking about, what's going on around politics, right? Like about policy? And I don't have an answer. I have mostly questions all the time. But I do think it's important to really center it as we move forward as a field. Like, in the future, when we look back, what is going to be math's role? How did we help with climate change? Do we help when there's a pandemic? And it's not questions I have an answer for, but I really, really I really want us to think about it.
It's like a question because at Xavier, we are basically a pre-med school. So all the freshmen who are applying, even though they are good in math, but from their parents, I think they want them to go into pre-med or pre-pharmacy. That's it. They want a nice career. So it's like some of them, they don't know what you can do with math. It's like, oh, you can just be a teacher, teaching, that's it. So you can be go to law school. Actually, our president, the former president, Dr. Francis, was a math major from Xavier. He went to law school and he became the president. So that's a good example that you can be. That's a nice, strong background. You have a nice background and you can be anybody you want to be. I think so. That's like something serving the society, like with a math degree.
Yeah, I totally agree with what everyone has said so far, that, and the idea that math can be used to solve a lot of problems that exist in the world, like climate change. Math modeling can help understand and address these issues, infectious disease spread, which is what I'm working on right now. But in addition to that, I think there's also an appreciation of math as an art, and I think that um, math can help humanity in the same way that art does, and just like general appreciation of it, connection to your emotions and your feelings, to be able to express that, and we can somehow do. I haven't sorted it all. I haven't sorted it out in my head exactly what that means, but there's something beyond just the tangible benefits of math as well. And I think sharing that with people that also connect to their emotions in that way is very powerful too.
Yeah, I wanted to add that I absolutely love that, because, you know, I do think when I see a room full of mathematicians, we're there for the math, but math speaks to us in another way, and we're all trying to share that with our students, with the people around us, with the way we understand and communicate with the world. But it's not something we learn to express, right? Like I think math is beautiful, and when I see that my model does the thing it should be, I do view it as art, you know. And but you know, if I show it to my sister, she would be like, Vanessa, what are you talking about? But it's such you can grasp it, and I think that's a beautiful thing too, you know, that it speaks the same way as music and art for some of us, and sharing that is also very powerful. So I appreciate you mentioning that too.
Okay, our next question is, what are some common misconceptions people have? How can we combat these misconceptions and communicate more effectively?
Oh, I just saw your unmute go on, so if you want to speak. Otherwise, okay, I'll go. I thought about this question a little bit. I think the misconception that comes to my mind is that you have to be a certain type of person to be a mathematician. So you have to have a certain set of hobbies or books that you enjoy reading, or that there's certain music you listen to. But that's just not the case at all. You know, I think the media can lead us to believe that there's a certain type of person that is a mathematician, when you're actually when you're, you know, going to conferences, or like this conference, for example, you start to notice that there are so many different types of people that are mathematicians, and you don't have to fit into some box to be a mathematician. The thing that we do have in common is that we enjoy mathematics, and we put in the work to do it. I think that misconception is important to recognize and get over. And I think the way that we combat it is by learning about who we are, and being introspective, and taking the time to really learn about our own identities, and then being unafraid to be that person in the field of mathematics, and having you define the career rather than having the career define who you are.
Yeah, I will echo that, because I think that is, I love that message, because I think there's many misconceptions about who a mathematician is, and also what mathematics is, and I don't even know where to start sometimes. You know, I taught in my professional drift, I taught 10th grade geometry, and we were doing 2-column proofs. And I swear this is relevant. And at some point they were like, why do we have to show that the sum of the angles inside a triangle is 180? It's just true, right? Like, it is true. And I was like, well, actually, it's not always true though. What you're learning here is one type of geometry. And then I send them some links, and they were like, it was chaos in the classroom. They were like, why would they do this to us? Why didn't anyone tell us? And I'm like, well, it's overwhelming to tell you these things when you're just learning geometry, right? Like, we tell you later. And I think it blew people's mind. And I think we don't talk about these things often enough, that, math as a field has also a very narrow presentation to the outside world, right? Like, people don't realize there's all these levels. Also, people don't realize that math is not as objective as we'd like it to be, right? There's always assumptions, and someone made the assumptions, right? Like, and we build around all our math around assumptions, and is not as straightforward as you might think. And the second one in particular is the one I found myself, the misconception I try to address the most, and I'm not sure I do a great job at it, is that, math is not objective. It's culture. It's tied to culture. It's tied to so many things that don't do with the math, just the math. And as a data science consultant and instructor, this comes up a ton, because we're building machine learning models or AI, and they're like, okay, this is my model. It's like, well, think about all the assumptions that went into the model. How can we misuse it? And it's just not straightforward at all. It is a craft also. It is an art. There's choices that are being made. And I don't know how to fix that misconception. I think it's gonna take some time, even within our community, right? To make sure that everybody understands or sees that. So that's a misconception that is always on my mind.
I completely agree. Like most people, and me included, for example, the first thing, like, who's a mathematician? Am I a mathematician? I've never called, if people ask me, what do you do? I'm like, oh yeah, I teach this class. I've never ever said I'm a mathematician. And I think, like, combating these misconceptions starts from us. And then talking to our students, because they also don't know what mathematics is. And until we actually explain this to them, versus saying, oh, this is what my class is, or the fact that you don't see the connection is your fault. No, we need to tell them what we think mathematics is and what mathematics is for us, and not give up on that. It will take time, just as it took time for us to learn these things, and just start from us. And hopefully this will ripple through the community and change a lot of people.
So our next question is, how do you encourage students that have been previously victimized by mathematics? These are not easy questions.
Yeah, it's not an easy question. It's very heartbreaking to see. Like, I think all of us have been, this is what always everybody says. You say you do math, it's like, you're so smart, I hate math. Math's the worst. And it comes from real trauma, of their learning experience. And I don't know how to undo that trauma, right? Like, I think part of it is, like Kalina mentions, trying to showcase what math is to you, right? And trying to showcase what a relationship with math could be like. But sometimes it's really hard for me to see how to go back and help the students move past that, because I feel like it really ripples through their whole career afterwards, right? Those bad math experiences. So I think a lot about, well, acknowledging that, right? That there's some trauma there, and trying to see in ways that instead of saying like, oh, this is how math is, or this is how math is to me, adapt to that, really trying to get the students to explain what math is like for them, does that look like for them, and trying to build around that. And that is very difficult, and it requires building a relationship of trust with the students or whoever that is in the context. But that's sort of how I've been thinking about that. Also, I will say that Selby mentioned victimized by mathematics or mathematicians or the culture. Yes, it's kind of all, for me, it's like all of them, but they definitely require different approaches.
And it's sometimes really hard to tell which one it is, even for the students. Like, oh, I'm bad at math. No, you're probably your teacher was teaching you poorly and made you feel like you're incapable of doing this. And sometimes just saying, hey, just you missed some stuff. You have some gaps in your knowledge, but we'll fill them up, and then everything will stand. And this is the reason. You're not stupid. And this is sometimes important to say, but trauma is a real thing in academia in general, and we're not prepared to deal with much of it.
So some of them in class, even if it's basic algebra classes or something, they don't want to try. They just want to sit there and copy it. So I'll ask them, try. I'll just I cannot waste too much time, but write the next step, then something will come out of it. They just don't, they want to know, they don't know how to do it. They won't try even one step at a time. So it's a do that, and don't say that, don't have it, I cannot do that in your vocabulary. Just try, something will come out. But that's very hard to for them to change. So that's why sometimes I tell, I don't like to say I cannot do anything. I try to do it, except I don't know how to ride a bike. So I won't challenge myself. I don't know how to ride a bike. I'll try. So it's not like that. You can try doing a math problem. If it doesn't work, it's okay. So that's, if you try, sometimes it works. And we have had students changing from chemistry or biology to math. Actually, yesterday, our speaker, Reagan Higgins, I think she was a pure math major. She was my student, so way back. So we have a few undergraduate math majors, but it's very hard to bring them into math. So that's that misconception.
Yeah, I think this is a very challenging question, and I'm still trying to come up with ways of doing this. And one thing is that I think sometimes it can take more personalized attention. So encouraging students to come to office hours where you can spend more time with them one-on-one or in smaller groups to work through things. And somehow, like, through that process, teaching them, encouraging them to be patient with themselves, and maybe also by example that you do that. And another thing that I think a lot about, and I'm constantly trying to like read about on the internet or books, is this idea of the growth mindset, and how to encourage the growth mindset in students, so that they recognize they recognize that, okay, they might struggle, but in each of at each step they're still growing, and it's just part of the process, and that you can grow, and somehow encouraging not to be frustrated. Yeah. So I didn't summarize growth mindset well, but I would just, if you're curious to learn more, read about it. I'm a little rusty on my teaching because I haven't taught this year. So, but yeah, definitely something to look into. There's like presentations on growth mindsets that have been developed that do a way better job of talking about it than me.
I'm so grateful you brought it up because that's something I also try to do with myself. I think we need to model, like you said, what we believe you should do math. And I think when we do teach math, right, we teach this is how you solve a problem. We go through examples, and it totally gives that impression, right? That we didn't have to try, because at some point we don't have to try that hard because we've been doing this for so long, right? They don't see your first proof, or they don't see like you failing at solve a problem. And I don't know, I think I've tried in the past to share that part of me with not, I don't think a lot of success. But it is important because I think it also ties to the fear of failure. We have it too, and in our cases, our students case is fear of failing math, right, or being wrong, or it stops them also from trying. So I don't know. I think it's also that growth mindset that no, like this is actually how this process looks like. I failed a bunch too, and it's, I don't say it in a way of like being mean to myself. It's just like a fact. And I feel like until we don't normalize that failing is part of learning in the process, then our students are just not gonna feel good. So there's not gonna be that incentive to try. So yeah, I always think about how can I make that clear, in those brief interactions you may have with students, that there's always room to grow, that failing is just part of the process. And, I don't know, that they're not failing by themselves, they're like failing with me too. That I'm here to help them, hopefully not fail, but like through the process of failing, get to where they want to be.
So our next question comes from Dana, and he asks, do you keep a regular weekday routine in your day? Like, do you eat at a regular time, sleep at a regular time?
Yeah, I try to, just because that's how I function as a person. Like I like routine, and I like things to be very structured and organized. Yeah, so I think my day-to-day is in terms of like waking up at a certain hour and kind of routine based, and sleeping at a certain time. Yeah. So, but I mean, on the then what I actually work on from day to day varies and changes.
Yeah, it's the same with me too. You try to do the same, wake up at the same time, go to bed. But sometimes you cannot do that. Sometimes that's okay. So
Yeah, I will say I don't function without structure. I mean, I function, but very inefficiently, and then I end up with a lot of pressure. So I try to structure my days um, to better do what I want to do. Flip side, if I have too much structure, I feel like I'm constantly failing. Therefore, I don't do the stuff I need to do. So I'm gonna share it with you because like this is something I'm testing out. I have blocks of time. So I made like a, let me see if I can show it to you. Yeah, my background is not gonna let me. Let me see if I can get rid of my background for a sec. Here, you see I have like my weekly board, and I have some times, and I have blocks where I say what I'm gonna do. It could be a meeting, could be work, could be anything else. Um, but then what I've been trying to do is use this as my structure. But the goal of this structure is actually to maximize the green blocks, which is my free time where I can actually choose what to do. So that's like a very different approach. So before, I used to structure everything in my Google Calendar, and then, what time I ate, when I exercise, when I relaxed. But I don't work like that. So like and then I felt guilty when I was relaxing because I was thinking of work, or I was not being able to work because I was needing relaxation. So I structure for me works if it's interdependent with what I need to be at my best self. Meaning, like, I need to make sure, right, that I have breakfast, you know, that I have my active moments during the day. I choose what active means. It can be a walk, yoga, or Zumba. Those are my top three. But yeah, it has to be that balance for me. And each day will look different. I choose how to schedule it to get sort of the minimum work requirement. And if I want to do more, I do more. But I think finding the structure that works best for you is kind of very necessary because it ensures that, you know, you take care of yourself too. So I'm structured as long as the structure helps me take care of myself. When the structure is too tight and it starts getting into like it's messing with my mental health, then I you know lay back off it. So there's some.
Thanks, Vanessa. I wanted to say I have a very similar board like on my desk. So I also have everything blocked out, and I know my Tuesday morning is just for me, meaning I'm going to work on whatever I want. And I also work with structure. The moment I lose the structure, I lose track of my time, and I become very inefficient. And the more I grow throughout my career, I get more stuff done if I have structure. If I know I'm going to be at my desk at 8 and I'm going to have a lunch break at 12 and I'm going to work until 5 and whatever, because this is when I get hungry again. But then after that, sometimes I work, but this is sort of a choice and I feel good about it because I decided that this is my time and I can do with it whatever I want. But yes, a structure, and this is the one way to make sure you're getting enough rest and sleep and all the human things you need to function, because you are a human, not just a mathematician.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. Also, these like unstructured times are just like really important for your creativity that you need in research, right? The times when you haven't like allocated to doing any particular thing are the times that you feel free to like wander in your own brain and mind and let it kind of like carry on in these like weird directions that it might want to go in. And those are where how the creative process works, and those are really important. Yeah, and in terms of like how I'm working right now, I started doing this thing where I do 30-minute intervals. So I work 30 minutes, like very focused, and then I take like a break for a few minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. And then I go back and try to do another 30-minute interval. And I set goals for how many hours I want to like work in the day. And it also allows me to like be done working once I've reached that, which is really important.
And I wanted to add, because there was a very important word, like I use it a lot now, choice. Anytime I'm forcing myself to do them, I do it suboptimally. When I choose to do it, I'm in, and it's tricky because you have responsibilities, you know, that you can't always, you know, fit in your schedule. But you know, I didn't notice until my partner was working with me remotely, right? And he was like, "You look really upset." I'm like, "I'm not upset. I'm just working." And it's because at that point, that's not what I needed. But I was, you know, exuding misery vibes. And obviously my work is affected by that because I'm not enjoying it. I just feel like something I have to push through or drag through. But like Kalina mentioned, you know, when you choose to do something and then you're able to be present in that choice, then you know you can relax well, you can work well. You know, it's very important that you choose that.
Okay, so moving on, our next question is, what is the one piece of practical advice you would give someone starting out?
Yeah, find out from everywhere what you really want to do. Be prepared for it and ask questions, and don't waste your time doing something else and then coming. It's nice to, uh, what is it, look around for some time, but don't waste your time too much. Be Now there are so many opportunities. You can Google search this, you can find out what you can do with your degree, what you want to do, and uh, choose accordingly. Be planned, be a little prepared before you choose into something. I'm talking about after you're undergraduate or something, whatever you want to do, if you can stay focused and go, that will be nice. And you have many opportunities now. You can search around.
Yeah, along the same lines, I had two practical advices. One is that I heard from somebody else, I think last year, was to develop a mission statement. So take some time to write down, like, what are your goals and what is it that you're trying to do in like a broader sense, and what is, you know, going back to how Vanessa started with the slide that she had, what are your values? What are you good at? What are you enjoy doing? And what was the last one? I don't remember, but thinking about what your mission is at this moment right now, and what you want to do beyond that. And this can change, obviously, like as you progress at any point. But it's really important to have that to motivate and guide you in your choices. So that's one. My second piece of practical advice was that I thought of was to write every day a little bit. I think writing is so important as a way of having a conversation with yourself on what you've accomplished during that day, what you learned, and just like reflecting on anything that you thought about. And this could be like writing mathematically, or it could be writing scientifically, or like personally and professionally, or professional goals as well.
Yeah, I second both advice. I think writing has been something that it takes time to develop that habit, and it took a long time for me to develop that habit, because I'm like, I'll remember. Um, Eventually, you have a lot of things to remember. So, and it helps you really think back of like, right, what are some things that could be improved, or even if you start noticing maybe there's a change of direction that is needed, um, and and that's very very important. I think someone who's starting out, for me, is kind of explore, but it can be really overwhelming, honestly. Like, I think everybody tells you like, oh, get a math degree, you can do anything, but the anything is so broad. Like, I cannot, like, even for me, right, like I already did my PhD, and I think about ways I can use my math, and it's like there's so many directions. How do you choose one? That's where, like, I think what Swati said about the mission statement that might change is crucial, or having some assessment of your overall life goals, because I think it ties into what all the other panelists have said. You don't want to waste your time, and I'm a firm believer that if you're enjoying what you're doing, you're not really wasting your time, right? But because not all the time you're allowed to have the space to really think these things when you're studying or when you're in the job market, it can get lost. Those things can get really lost. So I think if you're starting out, it's good to, talk to people also, right? Like, don't be afraid to reach out. If you see someone who's doing what you think you might like, just schedule just a small chat with them so you can get a feel for what that looks like out of, like a description of a website. Um, and start doing maybe your own projects and exploring. I think that's something I didn't do that much. I mean, the projects were always given to me, right? You get a research advisor, you get homework from your classes, but eventually I think trying your figuring out, oh, this is something I find interesting, let me go explore that, is also very enriching, and it helps you find that direction. Because in practice, what it will look like is you have things you like, and then you're gonna figure out a lot of things you don't like. It's easier to find the things that you don't like than the ones you really could invest, the rest of your life in, right? It sounds like that. So explore, make a plan, right? Figure out steps so you can explore. And just reach out to people who are already doing what you're interested in. They will give you the like the word on the street, kind of like they will tell you what's up, and that's something that is really important as well.
Yeah, this has been some amazing advice. The last thing I want to add and just sort of piggyback off of what Vanessa was saying, find someone who has already walked that path. You don't have to walk the same path. Just see what's there. See what their approach was. Maybe they learn something from their mistakes. It doesn't have to be your professor. Find someone, if you're a freshman, find a junior. See what classes they took and whether they're happy or not, if they think they should have taken them earlier. If you're in grad school, find those other students of your advisor and see what they learned about working with this person or not. You need that someone to tell you, hey, I tried this, it didn't work. So you don't have to repeat other people's mistakes. And feel free to make your own mistakes. Feel free to have your own choices and taste in mathematics and stand behind those, because you're ultimately doing math for yourself, not for other people.
Okay. Next, we have an interesting question. What is the role of drugs in mathematics? Do you notice colleagues or students using Adderall, for example, or to what extent is this healthy or unhealthy?
I haven't noticed my peers, but when you're in the classroom, sometimes students are chit-chatting and they're like, oh, I spent the last night preparing for the midterm, so I drank a bunch of Red Bull and I don't know what combinations of like coffee, Red Bull, and whatnot. And you're like, no, right? I don't know the culture. I feel like I'm not in that culture to really know what that's like, but I do not recommend, like, unless there's a need. There's some people who use medication, right? And they need that. If you don't need that, I don't really see the upside, because it comes with potential health risks, right? And I think, right, like for me, my drug of choice is coffee, right? Like I drink it every day. It operates in the same way, like if I'm stuck on a problem or I need to stay up later than my body needs to, maybe I use coffee. And we think it's like okay because coffee is accepted, but it can be really harmful as well. But I think that that's something to be really mindful. I don't think you learn it until you're older, though. Like I understand when you're younger and when you're in undergrad, there's a lot of pressure, and your peers may be doing things that are not that healthy, but they do come at a cost, even if they don't seem like it at the time. So that's sort of like, I know I sound like a mom, but like it's honestly how I feel.
Yeah, I agree on that too. And I was a student way back, so I was not aware of all these. I think it's not good for you in the long run. And I also drink coffee. That's my to stay up late. But when I was doing my PhD, I used to drink a hot cup of coffee and then go to sleep. Somebody said warm coffee makes you sleep also. So that didn't help when I was doing my PhD because I started work before I finished my PhD. I started work at Xavier. So I thought it would be easy. That's one thing that I want to say. It's not easy. I was almost finished and I thought, oh, just Xavier and Tulane, it's close by. I can go there. And again, back then we didn't have anything like personal computers. We were still typing the papers and things like that. And that didn't happen also. It took me 2 more years to finish after coming up here. So I used to drink a lot of coffee, but I'm so tired after my classes here and there. I drink a cup of, I won't know that. Next morning I'm waking up by 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, I slept, I sat and slept. But You need to do what you need to do, but I'm not a big fan of any drugs or anything. So like you said, I don't think it's good for the long run.
We're starting to run up against time. So if Kalina and Swati, you have something to add real quick, here's your chance.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I haven't noticed it a lot, but I think if it's there, like a drug problem or excessive use of drugs, I think it's highlighting a general issue in our society about pressure and people feeling pressure or stressed to achieve and obtain some higher standard that someone else set out for them, and we should be mindful about that and try to encourage people to be mindful when they're making choices about what they're doing and why they're doing it and who's it for, and hopefully encourage people to value their health and their well-being in a way to make positive choices for themselves, whatever that means to them.
Yeah, it's of course this is a case to case basis, but often this is a symptom of another underlying problem, and it could be poor time management, could be pressure from expectations, could be something else. So maybe that would be the thing to be addressed. What is driving students to take such medication? But yeah, I agree with all my colleagues.
Well, thank you so much, all of you panelists, for coming to share your answers. There's somebody on the Slido said, this is not a question, just a comment. What a wonderful panel. And thank you for all of your wonderful, thoughtful, and authentic answers. And I think that sums it up pretty well.
Yeah.
So why don't we give a round of applause to our panelists for coming to talk to us today and answering some really tough questions, but giving some really great answers.
Yeah, I also wanted to say I'm also available via email if anyone wants to ever talk about anything.
Same.
It was nice. It was a nice discussion panel. I learned a lot from you. Okay, thanks. That was a nice